Rightio, welcome back to the All Out NRL Fantasy Podcast, episode 3 of our pre-season run-up. We got our first podcast for this man, Cooper Bentley. Welcome back to the podcast, mate.
Wow, it is truly special to be back for another fantastic big year. Last year, we had a pretty good year, I'd say. Not as good as the year before, the iconic year. But I think this year we're going to go to bigger and better places, and I think number one is in some serious strife.
Oh, mate, we always love to remind people of our number one placing after the first 4 weeks, and I think it was the 2021 season, was it, where we finished first after 4 weeks? So,
we were first twice, by the way.
If you're actually new to the podcast, welcome, because you're surrounding elite type stuff.
You're going to get reminded of this like every few weeks if you forget. Just, if we're coming outside of the top 10K, like we just have to say it.
Yeah, mate. I mean, like this next podcast, the first two preseason podcasts have done quite well, so we really do appreciate all the support. Make sure to subscribe, follow the Instagram. We're nearing 30K there. This next podcast, we're for the people, mate. We put it out to the people what they wanted, and they wanted the top 5 must-have players in each position. So that's what we're running with today. We've got the hookers, the halves, the centers, the edges, the middles, all you can ask for. Our best 5 in each position, we think, this year.
Yeah, and I know you got to follow the Instagram as well, because we put up some polls in the story saying, what videos do you guys want to see? And this one had overwhelmingly the most amount of votes.
Oh, the poll was humming.
We do some special polls, and obviously you can see what everyone is saying about all the players in the podcast. So make sure you just pop a question in, pop a vote in, and your voice is being heard.
We love the fans' voices being heard on the podcast. And like normal preseason podcasts, it is going to be a 20-minute run-up of what we're going to be discussing. Like we said, the top 5 must-have players in your team for 2025 per position, which we're going to be running through. It's obviously subjective. It's what our opinion is, but what I can see from the list here, it's a pretty good list. And if you don't have these guys, maybe rethink your teams.
Yeah, I'd say maybe reset.
Yeah, hit the reset button for the 100th time, because I know I've done that.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reset your team, because it's normal. I've reset my team maybe 50, 60 times already. And realistically, your team's going to change so much before TLT comes out. So it's that time where you can just investigate and really test out some players for now.
Yeah, well, let's crack on straight away, mate. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube, follow the Instagram and all the socials. We really do appreciate it. Make sure to interact with us, because we do love the banter. Let's start it straight away with the wing fullbacks, mate. Isaiah Iongi is our first must-have pick in our top 5 for the wing fullbacks. 350K, ownership of 50.6%. So, look, the Eels fullback is probably going to be the most targeted player this year, definitely in preseason.
Yeah, well, they've lost Gutho and Talagi, so they've got that new spot coming in for Iongi. And at 350K, what's the risk, really? There is pretty much zero.
Yep.
And I think he's got a very good opportunity there to score some good points. If you don't have him in your starting team, chuck him in the bench. What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. We were talking off podcast that there's no real risk with Iongi, because like 50.6%, everyone has him. So if he does do poorly, then you're with the rest of the crowd. So that's okay. The next player, or the next 4 players we have on our list here are all guns. And when we go through these lists, you'll see that they're not just the guns, they're also the cheapies, they're also the mid-ranges. So these are the top 5 people in these positions that we think are the best for your team.
In no particular order.
In no particular order, of course. But these next 4 people, Ponga, Mitchell, Trbojevic, Edwards. Our thinking here, Bence, is that we need at least 2 of those 3 guys to go with Iongi. So they're your next best 4 people to go with Iongi in your starting team.
Yeah, I think the fullback positions is lacking quite a few cheapies. So you can get Iongi, and then it just makes sense to have 2 other guns there.
2 guns, yeah.
And honestly, there's no wrong choice out of all those players you just named. And there's even some other ones that probably just missed the top 5, in my opinion. I could say Reece Walsh could make that list as well. No matter who the guns are, if you got at least one of those big boys, I think you're doing well with Iongi.
Yeah, I'm really looking at Pappenhausen, Kalen Ponga in my team this year. He is, what is he here? 730K, 18.5% of teams at the moment, but his draw is what I really like. Tigers, Dolphins, Titans to start the year, a bye in round 4. Then the Doggies, Tigers again, Sharks, Warriors, Rabbits. So there's some big scoring opportunities there for Ponga, who we know loves attacking upside. I mentioned Ryan Pappenhausen there because I feel like he is our sixth best option in that sort of list. He's a bit cheaper than these guys. So if you're struggling for some salary cap and still want someone who definitely has heaps of potential in a Storm side that is very good in attacking base, is Ryan Pappenhausen. I'll get his stats here. 530K, average 40 last year.
Pappy's a bit of a risk. He's just got that cloud above him where either he booms or he's a doom.
Yeah.
And I'm not even trying to refer to
Boom
those TikTok.
or doom.
But if he doesn't get injured and the Storm cook as they tend to do, then he is such a buy at 530K, to be honest. But after the PTSD of the last 2 years of him just getting injured every 2 weeks, I'm going to avoid and see how he goes.
Yeah, good pull there, mate. I mean, let's move on to the centers. And now this is where things get interesting because we know, mate, if you're an experienced fantasy player, that the center position is always a tough one to go with. So who are our top 5? In no particular order, Jack Bird is our first one. A lot of questions about Jack Bird and a lot of comments about him, whether he's good enough. I know you're not really a fan.
Yeah, look, I have a word that I like to say, trapezoid, which also means trap. And he just reeks of it, to be honest. But at 362K, once again, in that center position, the centers are always the lowest scoring position.
Yep.
I just don't think you can really go wrong. This is one that I would have to wait for TLT to see where he's starting. If he's starting in the middle, it's a no-brainer. He'll get 30 at least every single week. But yeah, the ownership of 41.8%, once again, you might as well just get him for now.
Exactly. I just see him as 362K as pretty much a must-have in my team. I'm just going to be throwing him in there in the centers. Yeah. If he was 400K, 420K, I'd probably rethink it. But 362K, that's affordable for me. The next man who we're going to talk about is Robert Toya. We were talking in the last podcast. We know a bit about Rob. I've heard news that he's maybe struggling back from his second ACL injury. But at 230K, it looks like a pretty good option.
Yeah, once again, another one you're going to have to wait for TLT for. If he's starting, it's literally the biggest no-brainer out of everyone. 230K, and this kid is an absolute weapon.
Yeah, he is a threat.
If he's starting, he's not coming out of that team for the rest of his career, probably.
No. And the good thing is at the Roosters is there's legit no one else. So they have Jackson Paulo, I believe, and Marky Mark. So it's going to be one out of those three. And I'd say Rob is probably a lock for at least one of them. Our next man, he was probably the shining light of 2024 in the centres and really came from nowhere. No one was really expecting it. Was Herbie Farnworth, 734K, definitely the most premium option in the centres. And like we say on this podcast, you never really go for that premium option unless he's a second rower. Your thoughts on Herbie? 5.6% of teams.
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty perfectly just then. I wouldn't be spending 734K in the centers. There's just no point. I'd rather go for someone who has a bit of upside. In saying that, if you're getting Herbie, you're probably just not going. You don't have to worry about that position for the rest of the year because he just cooks every single week. Last year, you got a few tons as well. But for me personally, I wouldn't be starting with them.
Ruben Garrick and Jacob Carraz round out our top 5 for the centers. What I've found out here, Bence, is that the centre position lacks those guys that are actually playing in the second row and lock this year to throw them in. So if you start with a Ruben Garrick and a Jack Bird, I can almost understand that. Ruben Garrick's 583K, obviously kicks goals, is an attacking threat out there in the centres with Turbo, and we know what he can do when he and Manly are on full flight. Jacob Carraz, 641K. Interesting to see whether he actually starts in the centres or the wing. I know he scores a lot better on the wing than he does in the centres, so it could be a wait and see again for TLT, but he slips into the top 5.
Yeah, Kiraz is a little bit too uncertain for me. When he was starting wing center every single week, it was changing. I didn't like that. I'd probably go for Ruben Garrick over him, and he's got that absolute shoe on him as well.
Yep.
And if the Seagulls do well with Turbo, then he does well as well.
Yeah, good call, mate. I mean, with the halves as well, as we move into the halves, it's a really interesting one because every single team, I reckon, if you don't have this guy, then I don't know what I'd do, but he was $1 million last year and people still bought him. He's now 880K. He's in 55% of teams, which is good, but it's Nathan Cleary. If you're not getting him for 880K when he started $1 million last year, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I know I said earlier I've reset my team about 50 to 60 times. I've never not had him in my team.
He's the one guy to lock.
Why would you not get him? Just captain him. And the team that they have around him, they've got a few guns in there with Talagi and Papali'i this year. If you're not getting Cleary, you're just going to be falling behind. He's the GOAT of fantasy.
You simply have to have him. And the other guy that was a $1 million last year, also in our top 5 here, is Nico Hines. He's a bit cheaper at 825K, ownership of only 6.1%. So that's almost getting into pod territory there with Nico Hines. I could almost justify you getting him if you want that pod option and not go Cleary. I can understand it.
Something that's interesting as well is they're actually versing each other in the first round, Panthers and Sharks. I just think if you're going to get Hines, why aren't you just getting Cleary instead?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Unless you're getting both. Which would make the rest of your team a little bit worse. I would just be starting with Cleary over him. We just know Cleary tends to average more than him.
The Sharks do have a good opening schedule. They don't have a bye till that round 13 bye, and then they don't have a bye there on then till the 18th again. So they got a really good schedule. I'll have a quick look at Cleary's schedule if you want to justify that, but I'm pretty sure it's just a lock and load. Yeah, so Cleary doesn't have the bye till round 11. He'll then go to Origin camp, round 15 bye, round 18 bye, and then doesn't have a bye from 19 to 27 to end the year. So he's pretty much a lock for me, Nathan Cleary, as he should be. Who else rounds out our top five for the halves, mate? Jerome Luai, he's 589K, obviously making that shift to the Tigers this year, which has been highly talked about. There's definitely some potential for him to be a good buy, and you got some good stats here with him.
Yeah, you can look at Jerome Luai's stats starting at halfback, and they were quite incredible for the Panthers. I'm looking here, I got 53, 95, 60, 66, 52, 48. So obviously he's averaging around 60 starting halfback for the Panthers, and I think there's no reason why he can't do the same thing at the Tigers as well. He's going to be
He'll run the show.
Yeah, he's one of the leaders there as well. I think that he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. Yeah. But in saying that, I think he's going to have such a high workload, and he's going to have his hands on the ball, and he's going to be an absolute stud, I reckon.
Cam Munster's around the same price, or he is the same price actually, 589K, ownership of 19.9%. A lot of people will be running Cleary and Munster this year to start the year. We know Munster's better than a 589K price tag. We know he's a 700K, 800K guy. So I think it would be silly not to start with Munster and Cleary.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing for Munster is obviously that round 2 bye. So as long as you have someone on the bench, which we'll get to, I think Sandon Smith's one of the other halves who's in our top 5. He's 250K. So if you're getting Munster, you just got to make sure you got him in the reserves.
Yeah, good point on Sandon Smith. 250K, ownership of 45%. He's probably an emergencies guy for me at the moment. He'll probably just be slapped into the emergencies. Munster, when he has his round 2 bye, he'll come in for him, and then he'll just be back into the emergency, just churning away that cash probably. There's
been an unfortunate trend in the past couple of years where there'll be a really cheap half making pretty much their debut, starting in a new team, and they just score so shit.
Yeah,
that's just how it goes.
Elias from memory, hands,
there's so many, and I think for me, reserves, like if I need to, maybe bench, but I just get that little reek, you know?
Yeah. Hope you're following along nicely here. If you have any comments, make sure to comment as well. Your favourite player that we've talked about so far. Maybe even a pod, because we do like a pod on this podcast.
I love a pod.
We love pods. Moving on to the edges, mate, and a lot of high-priced edges here in our top 5, but also some mid-ranges, because I know the guys like mid-ranges. Isaiah Papali'i opens our account for the edges in the top 5. 622K. He's in 45% of teams, which he should be. He's on the edge for the Panthers. We know what this guy can do. He's an 800K player.
2 years ago, he was a captaincy option for everyone week in, week out.
Yep.
He's just gone into the best team of all time pretty much, and he's going to be right next to big Nathan Cleary, which just makes him an absolute buy. 45% once again. If he scores bad, guess what? So is everyone else. But I think he's one that I can't resist.
Yeah, and another guy that I'm looking at who's only in 8.5% of teams, and we know also what he can do, shifting clubs to the Cowboys, is Johnny Bateman. He's in our top 5, 595K. He might take a leadership role at the Cowboys, I've been hearing as well, in that leadership group. If he plays 80 minutes, he'll get through 50 points of work. We just know what he's like.
He's one that has a little bit of risk, but he has so much upside there. Once again, a few years ago, he was upwards of 800, 850K, I want to say. So when he is on, he is on.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we haven't seen that in him in the last 2 seasons, or last year, I should say.
Yep.
He's someone that I'm probably going to miss to start, but I do not blame anyone if they want to get him as a little bit of a potty.
Yeah, well, the Cows have Nanai on one edge and probably Bateman on the other. Do they run a edge on the bench? Probably not. We'll see.
They've tended to do that in the past, but they've lost Finau
Fikaki. Lukey's gone. So it could be an 80-minute role for Bateman, and a definite pod, in my opinion, if he's only at 8.5% teams. This next 2 guys, David Fafita and Angus Crichton, we know what they can do. They're in our edges, top 5. David Fafita has the round 1 bye.
The fact that he has a 1.6% ownership, it just makes you want to buy him. That's ridiculous. He's one of the best players in the game.
It just reeks pod. If you want to risk your round 1 score to get Dave Fafita in, go for it.
It would be exciting. And when you have him in his team and he's getting line breaks and offloads and just doing everything, tackle breaks, it is a truly special feeling.
Yep.
In saying that, the round 1 bye is pretty hard to get past, but 1.6%. That's filthy.
I know everyone, just like round one comes around, they're just like, I'm feeding points.
Yeah,
Give me points.
exactly.
And you don't want to see
number
round one bye. Jacob Preston, 695K, rounds out our top 5 for the edges in 2.6% of teams. Bit of a sleeper pick here for us. We were kind of going through the edge list and we're like, who could else be in this sort of category for our top 5? And Preston impressed last year for us for a period there before we shipped him on. So we're putting him in the top 5.
He's another one that can absolutely boom or bust.
Boom or doom.
He's a little bit, once again, you don't really know what you're going to get with him, but if doggies have a good year, he's going to have a good year.
Yep.
Right now, he's not on my team, but I can see why you would definitely get him.
I'm a big fan of this boom or doom segment.
Yeah,
we might have to bring it back.
We might get sued, but
yeah.
it's worth it.
Moving on to the middles, mate. 2 more to go. Middles and hookers to round out this podcast. Terrell May. I don't understand why he's not the most owned player other than Cleary. He's 48.4% of teams at the moment, 670K. Mate, he was a shining light at the Roosters last year.
He was playing like 40 minutes and he was averaging
50 points.
If he played 50 minutes, it goes up another 10. Plays 60 minutes, goes up another 10.
Mate, if he's playing 60, 65 minutes, and we did talk about this on the other podcast, and it's on the Instagram as a clip, it's 60 points.
Oh, yeah.
He'll be an 800K player.
Yeah, he's just get him, honestly. Yeah. Just get him.
Your man, Isaiah, I know you get it every year, 865K, 28%. It's just a pick him, lock him. You don't have to change it for the rest of the year.
Yeah, if you don't want to worry about a position, you just get Isaiah. Like, you know what you're getting with him. He plays for such a good team, has great attacking output. He does it all. He's a guaranteed 55 at least.
Yep.
It's so hard to go past him for me every year. And as you just said, I do tend to get him every year just to not worry about it.
It's another guy like that is Payne Haas. He's almost a stick and pick. There is some injury concern going into round 1. Is he going to be healthy? If he is healthy, what minutes is he going to play? So there is a concern there for big Payne Haas. That maybe means why his ownership is a bit lower and Isaiah is a bit higher. But we'll see what happens in round 1 when that happens.
Also, someone to keep in mind is they're shuffling that forward back a little bit at the Broncos right now. There's rumours that Hetherington might be playing lock and Pat Carrigan might come into the props as well. So that could mean maybe slightly more rotation between those two big guns.
Yep.
But it's something that you got to keep an eye on coming into round 1.
Moving on swiftly. Now, this guy we talked about in the Cheapies podcast is Royce Hunt, 275K. He looks like he's going to partner the opening front row position with Terrell May at the Tigers. So it could be a 1-2 punch here for fantasy teams. For the Tigers lands, it's a bit bold getting Tigers players, but I think they're turning a corner.
I've just got a few too many Tigers players. I don't really like it.
Yeah.
But what can you do? There's just so many good options this year.
Can I really have 3 Tigers players with Luai as well? I don't think I can do it.
You could have more there.
You could.
You could.
Honestly could.
Yeah, at 30.9% ownership, once again, I think you just chuck him on your bench or reserves, worst case. And I just have a feeling he's going to pack a punch off the bench and just score 30s, 40s. And that's all he really needs to make money. So
yeah,
I'd be getting him.
Mate, we love pods on this podcast. Corey Red Dog Horsburgh, he's gone away. He's lost a lot of weight. He looks fit and healthy, Corey. 550K, ownership of 7.3%. The fiery redhead could be storming into a lot of fantasy teams this year.
Oh, the year that he had 2 years ago when he was playing lock. He was playing 80 minutes.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
He was just a workhorse.
Yeah, and just out of nowhere, he just started averaging about 70 for a period. It was just insane.
Yeah.
But
Mate, he's a big sleeper for me right now, and he's slipping into the top 5 in the middles because, again, he's that mid-range price. If you don't want to go Haas, there's another 300K that you could save.
Yeah, I guess
Corey Red Dog Horsburgh, get him in your teams.
The issue is consistency does fluctuate quite a lot.
It does, yeah.
Oh, once again, if he hits, it's a big boom.
There's nothing better than a fiery redhead going hard at the attacking defensive line. I mean,
nothing better.
That's a boom, not a doom for me. Final category, mate, the hookers. Now, we talked off podcast that this is going to be a pretty interesting call for a lot of fantasy coaches this year, the hookers. Do you start with Harry Grant at 730K? And if you don't start with Grant, then who's the next best option? Grant's obviously in our top 5, ownership of 12.9% now. But these two cheapies that we've talked about is Peter Mamazoulis on the podcast and Blake Motzer. They're also in our top 5 for now. Do you see yourself getting either of those two?
It's really tough because I just want to have a hooker that plays 80 minutes.
Yep.
And Harry Grant's probably the closest you're going to get to that. And Harry Grant is also just the best hooker in the whole comp.
Yep.
For me right now, I can't go past him. I'm going to have one of those other cheapies on my bench for sure. And it's someone to keep in mind as well for the Broncos. There's rumours that Corey Peggs might start as well. Depending on who gets selected there,
yep.
whether it's Moser or him, they could definitely be buyers. Marmazulis, 45% ownership, 319K. I think he's going to start. He's probably someone that I will have on my bench partnering Grant to start.
We've got Reece Robson and Jeremy Marshall-King to round out the top 5, which means Damien Cook doesn't get that hooker top 5 position. Our reasoning, Jacob Little is also a 9 at the Dragons. He played very well. So where does Cook actually fit in for that setup? We'll have to wait for TLT, but he's actually out of our top 5 at the moment. JMK looks like a steady buy. He always plays around that 80-minute mark for the Dolphins. And, of course, Reece Robson will also play 80 minutes.
Yeah, Reece Robson's always a bit of a sleeper. He can do really well, but just once again, Harry Grant, you just know what you're going to get with him.
Yep.
He's just the most consistent out of the whole pack. He'd be my top 1, and I'd be putting Marmazulis, or however you say it. I'm sorry if I pronounce that wrong.
Marmazulis.
Yeah, I'd be putting him on my bench to back him up.
Yeah, good. Well said, mate. I hope everyone enjoyed that podcast, the top 5 of our opinion in each position. Make sure to subscribe, follow the Instagram. We're so close to 30K. I can feel, man. At end of February, hopefully. Yeah, we need the follow. But we don't. But we do appreciate it. Make sure to send us any DMs if you want any advice. We're doing fantasy team reviews. Spencer's always doing them. So
I'll be answering questions on the stories as well this
always
year.
Answering questions.
Any stupid questions I'll answer. Any really good questions I'll answer. It'll be a massive range.
And it's just good to see the fish of the week wants to come back. It's good to see the fans want that fish of the week.
We're going to have that banter again. Don't you worry.
Yeah, don't worry. All right, we'll see you next podcast. Yet to decide because we are very fan persuaded. So whatever you want, we're happy to oblige. Okay.
Awesome. We'll see you then.
See ya.